If these words found you right now, pause for just a moment and sit with that. Not everything lands in front of you at random. Not every message reaches you at the exact moment your heart is quietly asking questions it has not yet said out loud. Something in you has been searching. Something in you has been waiting, not necessarily for a grand revelation, but for a feeling that makes sense of everything that has felt so confusing. That is why you are here right now. The person who's been living in your thoughts, the one you keep turning over in your quiet moments, the one whose silence somehow feels heavier than any words they could have said, is connected to this moment more than you might realize. Stay with this, because what you are about to sit with could completely change how you have been reading their distance. It might dismantle the story your mind has been telling you in those late-night hours when everything feels most certain and most painful at the same time. The story that says you were not enough. The story that says they let go without a second thought. The story that says the silence is the answer and the answer is nothing. But listen carefully, because that story may not be the truth at all. Sometimes silence is not hollow. Sometimes it is the opposite of hollow. Sometimes it is packed with confusion, with unprocessed feeling, with fear, with all the words a person does not know how to arrange into something they can actually say. And when emotion becomes genuinely heavy, when it grows past the point where a person can manage it comfortably, something almost counterintuitive happens. They withdraw. They go quiet on the outside precisely because everything on the inside has gotten louder. So before you decide this chapter is finished, give yourself permission to hear this completely, because what looks over from the outside is not always what is happening within. The silence you have been carrying was never as clean or as simple as the hurt made it seem. It felt easy to read it as rejection. It felt logical to assume they had moved forward while you stayed behind with all the unanswered questions. It felt reasonable to conclude that their quiet meant you mattered less than you had hoped. But what if their pulling away came from emotional overload rather than emotional absence? What if what they were feeling became too intense, too sudden, or too difficult to hold in any kind of steady way? For a lot of people, deep feeling does not translate into open expression. It does the opposite. It drives retreat, not because they do not care, but because caring itself wakes up things they are not ready to face. Old wounds, old fears, old habits of protecting themselves that they have carried for years without ever fully examining. And when a real connection reaches those buried places, even something genuinely beautiful can start to feel threatening. So rather than speaking, they go still. Rather than explaining, they disappear. From the outside, it reads as coldness. From the inside, it often feels like chaos. This is why the next part matters so much. Silence does not always signal that feeling has gone. Sometimes it signals that feeling has become too tangled to name, too weighty to organize, too present to control. And when someone cannot manage what they feel, stepping back can become the only way they know how to breathe through it. The absence you experienced may not have been emptiness at all. It may have been internal conflict, the kind that forms when one part of a person recognizes something genuinely meaningful, while another part panics about what that meaning is going to require. What they may have been going through is not simple longing. It runs deeper than that. You may have awakened something in them that did not fit neatly into the emotional world they had built around themselves. Being close to you may have made them feel seen in ways they were not prepared for. It may have brought forward parts of themselves they usually keep carefully hidden. The tender parts, the uncertain parts, the parts that carry old longing and unresolved need. When another person does that simply by being who they are, the effect is powerful and disorienting at the same time. It creates a kind of inner division. One part wants to move toward you. Another part wants to run. One part feels something warm and honest and real. Another part feels exposed and frightened by how real it is. The connection itself becomes something they do not know how to hold. And their pulling away may not have been a statement about your worth. It may have been a reaction to what your presence was stirring inside them. That distinction is worth sitting with, because when someone retreats from something they cannot handle internally, the impact of that thing does not disappear. It stays. It lingers. It comes back in the quiet hours, in random memories, in moments when a specific song, or a certain kind of light, or a particular time of day pulls you back into their mind without any invitation. That is why something still feels unfinished. Because genuine emotional impact does not simply dissolve when someone goes silent. It often keeps moving beneath the surface where no one else can observe it. And that internal movement can continue for far longer than anything visible would suggest. There may be moments when you cross their mind without them planning it. Early in the morning, before the day takes over, late at night, when distractions have faded and the truth becomes harder to keep at arm's length. In the small pauses scattered through ordinary days. In the emotional emptiness that shows up when life feels routine, but something still feels absent. They may compose things to say in their head and never send them. They may rehearse a conversation and then retreat before a single word becomes real. On the outside, they may look steady, fine, busy, completely normal. But inner processing tends to wear an ordinary face. That is what makes silence so disorienting. Nothing appears to be happening. Yet underneath it, there can be accumulating pressure, returning memory, and unresolved feeling quietly building over time. What you meant to them may keep surfacing in ways they never voice. New conversations may feel thinner. New moments may feel less alive. Not because their life has stopped, but because certain connections leave an imprint that ordinary experience simply cannot replace. And if you have noticed strange echoes, sudden emotional shifts, or an unexplained heightened awareness around this person, that does not mean something mysterious is managing your life. It means the mind sharpens around what feels incomplete. Emotion makes familiar patterns louder. Uncertainty makes memory more vivid. The heart keeps moving toward what it has not yet fully made sense of. Keep going because this next truth is important. What you are feeling is not only about them. It is also about the deep human need for closure. When something meaningful stays unresolved, the mind keeps circling back to it. And this quiet period, as difficult as it is, can begin changing both people in ways that are hard to notice while they are happening. They may be questioning their own responses, wondering why this connection hit them so strongly, wondering why they could not hold it more gracefully, wondering whether stepping away protected them or cost them something they will not easily find again. That kind of honest reflection is rarely clean. It arrives in waves. One day a person feels they made the right call. The next day they feel the weight of everything left unsaid. Real internal understanding does not land all at once. It forms slowly and quietly while life keeps moving on the surface. And that is why visible change can appear sudden when it finally shows up. By the time someone reaches out, if they ever do, the emotional shifting has usually been happening in private for a long time. But here is where your focus needs to move, because while they may be changing inwardly, so are you. Waiting has a way of showing you your own emotional architecture. It reveals how much of your energy has been tied up in anticipation. It shows you how quickly the mind constructs entire narratives in the absence of real information. It shows you what sitting in uncertainty pulls out of you. The hope, the fear, the longing, the craving to just know. None of that makes you fragile. It makes you human. But if you stay inside that loop too long, you start living around a possibility rather than inside your actual life. And this is the real turning point. The goal is not to stop feeling. The goal is to stop letting unanswered emotion become the entire center of your existence. As the waiting stretches on, something quiet begins to shift. Your attention starts finding its way back to you, not all at once, not in some perfect dramatic reversal, but gradually and honestly. You start noticing your own days again, your own interests, your own body, your own thoughts, your own sense of direction. You begin to remember that your life was always bigger than one connection, even one that genuinely reached you. This does not erase what mattered. It does not mean pretending none of it was real. It means you stop vanishing into the silence of someone else. You begin reclaiming the parts of yourself that got quietly swallowed up in all the watching and hoping and analyzing and wondering. And that reclamation carries real power. Because when longing becomes less all-consuming, clarity starts arriving in its place. The feeling may still be there, but it no longer carries you off like a wave you have no control over. You carry it instead. You hold it with more steadiness and more space around it. And that changes what any future contact would meet, if it comes. Not someone collapsed under the weight of uncertainty, but someone more grounded, more clear-eyed, more settled in their own worth. Do not move past this too quickly. This is where something genuinely important begins. Not when you finally get every answer, not when the silence finally breaks, but when you learn how to live fully and honestly even without those answers. When the silence stops being the thing that decides your value, that kind of internal shift is not small. It changes the lens through which you see them. It changes the lens through which you see yourself. And it changes how you would navigate whatever comes next, if anything does. If a message ever does break through the quiet, it probably will not arrive the way it has looked in your imagination during the difficult moments. It will not be polished or perfectly timed. It may come in the middle of a completely ordinary moment and suddenly nothing feels ordinary anymore. A message, a call, an unexpected appearance. And what gives it weight will not just be the words themselves. It will be everything packed behind them. Everything that was delayed, everything that was avoided, everything that sat inside them for too long and finally found its way out. When feelings have been held back for a significant stretch of time, they rarely emerge in tidy form. They come in fragments, in pauses, in sentences that stop themselves halfway, because the feeling behind them is larger than the words available. There may be hesitation that has nothing to do with not caring and everything to do with caring too much to say it simply. There may be long silences in the middle of what they are trying to say. There may be an honesty that catches even them off guard. And if that moment ever comes, you may need to listen past the surface, to hear the truth underneath the awkward delivery, underneath the imperfect phrasing, underneath the emotional weight they are struggling to carry with any kind of composure. Because sincerity is not always fluent. The most real things are sometimes expressed the most clumsily. Truth shakes when it finally speaks. A person can sound unsure not because they do not know what they feel, but because they are trying to fit something enormous into words that feel completely inadequate. That kind of moment would not just be emotional release. It would be evidence that something shifted inside them enough that staying quiet became impossible to sustain. But even if contact comes back, that does not automatically make everything clear or easy. This part matters, so stay with it. Real feeling does not dissolve fear. Missing someone does not instantly produce readiness. A person can hold genuine care for you and still not know how to rebuild something that was broken or delayed or left hanging in uncertainty. They can recognize your value clearly and still struggle with trust, with timing, with vulnerability, with the accumulated weight of their own history. So if reconnection ever happens, it will not only be about what they feel, it will also be about what has genuinely changed in both of you during the time apart. Because time changes people, reflection changes people, pain changes people, growth changes people. Two people meeting again after distance are never quite the same two people who last stood in front of each other. That is why any return carries a choice within it. Not just the choice to reconnect, but the more honest and important choice about what kind of connection is actually possible now. Can what existed before come back in a form that is healthier than it was? Do your emotional needs align more genuinely than they once did? Are both of you more honest now, more aware of your own patterns, more capable of real steadiness? Or does the connection belong more honestly to the past than to the present? These are not small questions. They matter more than any fantasy does, because longing can make familiarity feel like destiny, even when the actual truth is more complicated than that. So if a door ever opens again, it cannot be walked through on hope alone. It has to be met with honesty, with self-respect, and with the courage to see what is actually real rather than only what you wish were true. There is one more truth here, and it may be the one you need the most. While it is natural to keep your focus on whether or not they return, the deeper story has always been about who you become while nothing is certain. This is where real transformation lives, in the waiting, in the moments when no answer comes and you still have to get up, still have to move through the day, still have to carry yourself forward with whatever you have. That process can either hollow you out or slowly, quietly build you. And if you let it, it builds you. You begin to understand that your emotional balance cannot keep living in someone else's hands. Your sense of your own worth cannot keep rising and falling with their presence or absence. Your life cannot stay on hold around a silence you did not create and cannot control. This realization does not make you cold. It steadies you. It teaches you how to feel deeply without handing your entire foundation over to someone else. It teaches you how to care without disappearing into the caring. It teaches you how to love without making uncertainty your permanent address. And once that lesson starts genuinely settling in, something shifts. You stop waiting in the same desperate, consuming way. You start living again in a real sense, not because all the questions have been answered, but because you are no longer defined by the absence of answers. That is real freedom beginning, quietly but unmistakably. And from that place, any future interaction becomes something you can actually see clearly. You can sense what is genuine and what is not. You can feel the difference between real change and a temporary wave of loneliness masquerading as something deeper. You can tell the difference between growth and regret without growth to back it up. That kind of clarity protects your heart without shutting it down. The intensity you once felt may begin to soften, not because the connection meant less, but because you are finally becoming larger than the waiting itself. That is often what healing actually looks like. It does not always remove the feeling. It changes your relationship to the feeling. Instead of being swept between hope and fear every few days, you find yourself standing somewhere more stable. You can remember without being undone by the remembering. You can wonder without chasing. You can carry the weight of what mattered without making it the only thing that matters. And when that happens, even the way you hold them in your mind begins to change. They stop being the center of an unfinished story and become one real and meaningful chapter in a life that is still going, still opening, still becoming. This matters more than it might seem, because many people confuse emotional intensity with emotional truth. But intensity alone does not tell you what is actually right for you. Sometimes it only reveals where your deepest needs and oldest wounds were touched. What you do with that awareness is where the real path begins. You can use it to understand your attachments more honestly, your patterns, your hunger for certainty, your fear of being forgotten, your habit of loading too much meaning onto what stays unresolved. And that awareness does not diminish what the connection was. It makes you wiser inside it. It gives you your own power back. It lets you hold the memory with open eyes instead of closed hands. Do not rush past this. The most important question may not be whether they return. It may be who you have become by the time you no longer need that answer to feel whole. And still, life has a way of circling back in unexpected ways. People do return. Old silence does break. Buried truths do surface when carrying them any longer becomes too costly. And if that happens here, it may come with a rawness you were not bracing for. Not small talk. Not a casual attempt to slip back into your world as though nothing was ever at stake. It may come with a kind of vulnerability they have never brought to you before, with an emotional exposure that only becomes possible after someone has spent enough time alone with themselves to stop outrunning what they feel. Their words may come in the wrong order. Their voice may be unsteady. Their honesty may look messy around the edges. But the real thing to watch for will not be the delivery. It will be this: has the silence genuinely changed them, or has it only made them lonelier? Because real growth leaves evidence, greater self-awareness, more honesty about what they avoided, more willingness to take responsibility for what was left undone. If all they bring is emotion without accountability, longing without any real clarity, the old pattern may simply be waiting underneath it all. But if what they bring feels steadier, more humble, more honest in a way that is hard to fake, you will feel the difference immediately. And even then, the choice will belong to you, not the version of you who once feared losing them above all else. The version of you who has learned how to stand on your own without being propped up by someone else's uncertainty. That version of you will know something important. A return is not valuable simply because it happens. It is valuable only if it meets you honestly, only if it offers something genuinely better than what the silence left behind. So let this settle as simply as possible. Their silence may have held far more feeling than you were able to read. Their distance may have come from something happening inside them rather than indifference toward you. Their quiet may have been full of thoughts and memories and emotions they could not carry clearly enough to share. That is possible, very possible. But your peace cannot be constructed entirely on that possibility. Your peace has to grow from something more solid and more self-sustaining than waiting for another person to finally explain what they never knew how to say. Your peace begins when you stop measuring your worth by what has gone unspoken. It begins when you bring your energy back to your own life, your own growth, your own future, your own inner stability. It begins when you accept that what is genuinely meant to reach you will find its way to you in time, and that what does not return cannot take away what you are. That is the place where fear begins losing its hold. That is where hope becomes something lighter and cleaner rather than something desperate. That is where life opens again. New experiences, new understanding, new strength, maybe even new love in whatever form your path is meant to hold. Because your story does not end inside someone else's silence. It keeps moving forward. It keeps shaping you. It keeps teaching you how to stay open without losing yourself in the process. And whether a message comes tomorrow or months from now or never at all, one thing stays true. What was real in you was real. What you felt genuinely mattered. What you learned through all of this matters even more. And the version of you rising through this uncertainty is already becoming more than the ache that first brought you here. If you still feel the weight of everything unfinished, that makes complete sense. The mind always wants to turn what is open-ended into something resolved. It wants to predict the ending. It wants to know whether the silence means loss or delay or fear or love or something else that has not revealed itself yet. But not every chapter shows you its meaning on demand. Some things only become clear after both people have lived enough and felt enough and changed enough to meet the truth without immediately fleeing from it. That is why forcing clarity tends to push peace even further away. Real emotional clarity usually arrives when the pressure eases, when the chasing stops, when the overthinking loosens its grip, when life is allowed to breathe again. And in that breathing space, what is actually real becomes far easier to recognize. If something is forming between you, it will form. If something is ending, that will become clear in its own time as well. Either way, your task stays the same. Stay rooted in yourself. Keep your heart open, but keep your own center too. Let memory be memory without turning it into a place you live permanently. Let longing teach you what it came to teach without allowing it to govern your choices. Let the silence reveal whatever it came here to reveal. And if one day their words finally do reach you, hear them from a place of calm rather than hunger. Hear them with clarity rather than desperation. Hear them as someone who has already come back to their own strength. Because that is the real shift, not whether they speak, but whether you have become someone who can face any outcome, whatever it turns out to be, and remain whole through it. That is where genuine peace begins. That is where your sense of your own power comes back. That is where this story becomes about more than waiting. So for now, breathe. Let the silence be what it is without forcing it to be proof that you were forgotten. Let the questions exist without letting them colonize every corner of your days. Let the connection mean what it meant, but do not let it become the only source of meaning in your life. Keep moving. Keep investing in yourself. Keep giving your energy to the parts of you that still need your attention, your care, your time. Because the deeper lesson here is not only about whether another person finally sees your value. It is about whether you see it clearly and completely enough yourself that no silence, no matter how long it stretches, can reach inside and take it from you. And once that truly settles into you, everything shifts. The way you wait shifts. The way you remember shifts. Even the way you love shifts. It becomes less about being chosen and more about living from your own truth. Less about chasing a return and more about honoring everything your heart has learned through going through all of this. If they come back, you will meet that moment as someone different than you were. If they do not, you will still have become someone stronger, wiser, and more genuinely alive than the person this uncertainty first found. That is not a small result. That is a profound one. That is the kind of change that does not wear off. So do not be afraid of this season just because it lacks clear answers. Some of the most important shifts happen in the quiet. Some of the most enduring versions of yourself are built in the spaces where no one answered and you kept going anyway. And one day you may look back on all of this and understand that what felt like being suspended in uncertainty was also a quiet and steady rebuilding. Not just of the connection, but of you. And in the end, that may be the part that matters most of all.